love to start our class off with prayer, and then we're going to dive into our topic for this week, and we'll get to know each other a little bit first. God, I thank you so much that we're able to be in this place. Lord, I thank you that as we come to you, what we're learning about this morning can be impactful for the work that you've given us to do. Lord, I pray for everyone in this classroom that we're able to see what you would have us see, to learn what you would need us to learn, and that we're able to go in and change the world in the ways that you have called us to change the world. You're a good God, and we love you, and we love your Son, Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. All right. So, as we're getting together, and normally this is where I would go through the list. Everybody's here, which is wonderful, and I'm glad you're here. But I want to get your thoughts. I would love for this class to have at least a little bit of discussion, and I know that some of you can talk and have no problem talking. So that means that I would love for you, if I ask you a question, that you actually respond. So I'm going to start with this. Why are you in here? And if your answer is this is a class they absolutely put me in because I came late and I didn't have a choice, that's perfectly fine. But I want to know, why did you choose a class that has the word post-truth in the title? Yes?
I chose it because I knew you were going to be the one teaching, and you always are great at teaching.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Because, we live in a world of lies.
Okay, that's bold. I mean, I don't know if you're entirely wrong. One of the things we're talking about this week, I'm going to get to you. One of the things we're talking about this week is when we use the word post-truth. That feels weird, right? Okay, before we get into anything else, what does post mean? The class is really living in a post world. What does post mean? After. What comes after? And we're in a world right now where we're saying everything is back. We're all saying everything that was, and usually it's a good thing that's in the past. So now there's something new. We're going into a new world, a strange, weird, new world. And so it's important that we say, what does that look like? And post-truth is in the title. Post-Christian is part of it. Postmodern is what we're going to be talking about today, and it's going to help set the groundwork. So I'm going to be talking a lot about, I'm going to be doing less, hey, here's what the Bible says today. We're going to be saying, hey, here's what's going on in culture. But we're going to get to that in a second. Yes?
I was going to say it's something like a topic that needs to be focused on in today's world. So
Yes.
It seems relatable.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope that as we set the groundwork, and as we work on what's going on in culture, what I hope we see for this first session today is that I'm not teaching you about culture. You're immersed in it, especially in high school. You get culture thrown at you constantly all the time. The music that you guys are talking about, bands that you're listening to, or usually artists, because bands aren't a thing anymore, or the TikToks that you watch, the memes that you send your friends, all of that is culture. And all of it is important that you understand sort of what's going on behind the scenes of culture. Any other reasons why you're here? To get to know me, hi, I'm Jake. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you are having a great time at Fuel so far. And what I'll let you know a little bit about me because I think that's going to be important. I am a pastor in Indiana. I have a family that's amazing. And when it comes to culture, this kind of stuff is stuff that is being talked about and discussed at Atlanta Bible College, and it's being discussed at the high levels of our world. And what I'm trying to do is say, what's happening at these big levels that you guys need to know about? What can we talk about in this class that's going to affect you tomorrow and the next day? And as you go from here, how you impact your friends at school, how you talk to those people who you say something and they say something completely different, and you are coming with alternative facts. Is another term, that we are seeing the world through completely different lenses, and part of that is our worldview and our culture. Let's go through this. Today we're talking about this term, postmodern. We're living in a post world. Everything's post. Postmodern is a term that's getting thrown around. Let's talk real fast. What does this word mean? What is modern? Just the general basic definition.
New, something new.
It's happening now. It's the current thing. And so what happened is that in the 1900s, there was a time called modernity, the modern time. And it had certain ideas and certain, we're good.
Hi.
Hi, yep, we got everything. Certain ideas, certain presumptions and presuppositions. And what happens is that we've moved past it. We'll talk about what those ideas were and how we've moved past it. But this is talking, when we say something is postmodern, we mean it's about a way of describing culture that we have moved past. Why is it important to know about culture? You said it's important. This class is going to be important about dealing with things in the world around us. Why is it important to know culture? What do you think?
You can get an idea of what other people believe and why.
Yeah.
Because they grew up that way.
Yeah. That's definitely part of it. Individuals are going to be shaped by culture. If you live in a world that has all styles of music are just percussion, you're going to be really surprised when there's a song that has a piano, because it's going to have melody and harmony. And that's kind of the thing, what we're talking about when we talk about culture. Culture will shape the way that we think about things, will shape the way that we understand the world around us. Knowledge of culture is important also because knowing culture will help us in evangelism. Evangelism is sharing the good news. It's talking to people about Jesus and saying, hey, I want to tell you about the person that I found that's changed my life. And if you don't know how another person thinks and feels, it's going to be really hard to share with them about Jesus. Because you're saying, hey, if I said to you, Jesus saves you from your sins, do you know what that means? Yeah, does anyone know what the words Jesus saves you from your sins means? Come on. You have to say yes.
Yes, I was shaking my head.
Oh, I didn't see you shake your head. You guys, I'm looking at you guys that are at my church. I would hope that you know what that means. But there are people who, when I say Jesus saves you from your sins, they don't know, if we're talking about a culture that has never met Jesus, they don't know who Jesus is. They don't know what the word saves mean, and they don't know what sin is. If our culture has no understanding of the Bible, then that phrase, that sounds like basic, good, biblical evangelism, means nothing. So it's important that we understand where people are coming from. What do they think it is? And the idea of culture could even be, we say, people are evil. What if you live in a culture where there is no such thing as good or evil? Where evil is a word that just means that evil doesn't mean what we think it means. Nobody's really evil. Like, that could be a part of our culture today. So it's important that we understand this, we understand culture for evangelism's sake. We also need to understand it for mission. So evangelism is me talking to one person. Mission is the purpose of the church. Going out together as a community into other places around the world. We think about, I'm going to give you some information now and then we'll solidify it with stats later. When you think about where we should go to preach the gospel, where are some places you think of? Africa, yeah. Where else should we go to preach the gospel? Where do you know right now there's some missionaries there are missionaries in different parts of the Church of God, which we're connected to. They're in different places. Where some of you think of? Yes? Jamaica. Okay. Peru. We have people in Peru. South Africa. So different countries in Africa. A lot of our work as the Church of God, which is the group that does this, we have places in Malawi, Mozambique, Kenya, which is all the eastern coast. The eastern coast of Africa. Here's some interesting information. It helps us focus our idea as a church as a mission. How much of, let's say, Kenya is Christian? Do you know? We go, we gotta preach to these people. Kenya is 85% Christian. America is less than 50. There are 100 million people in America who do not know Jesus. That's our neighbors. That's our culture. That's the world that we live in. And so when we say, oh, we need to, the mission of the church is to go preach around the world, the mission of the church, as Jesus said it, is to go, he says this in the book of Acts. Do you want to turn there? Let's open our Bibles. We'll crack our Bibles a little bit. We're going to turn to Acts chapter 1. Would someone, now, I'm going to ask you to do something crazy. Would someone like to read the couple verses in the book in Acts 1 for us? It's going to be Acts 1, 7, and 8. Nice and loud. Anyone?
No.
Go ahead. Yeah, thanks, Carter.
And he said to them, "It is not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority, but you shall receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you shall be witnesses to me in Jerusalem, and in all of Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth."
All right, Carter, what were the names of those places? He said a few different name places right at the end there.
Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem.
That doesn't work. Yes, you said it. Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then ends of the earth. When Jesus says, "You will be my witnesses," what he's actually saying is, you're going to start here, and then what happens is if you drew a map of the Middle East, Jerusalem's a city, Judea is a region, Samaria is the next region, and then the ends of the earth is everywhere all around the world, right? And so what we have here is this is Judea, and then we have Samaria. And then, so what he's saying is, you're going to have expanding influence all around the world to be my witnesses. So when we say, what's our mission? And we look around us, and we have a culture where very quickly we're approaching Christianity being less than half, and growing, it's shrinking extremely quickly. It's falling apart. Christianity's not the dominant force and it's not been the dominant force in Europe for quite some time. We say, our Jerusalem that Jesus tells us to go to first is our hometown. I think a lot of times we think, oh, it's great to go to the ends of the earth, and that's important. We should, but at some point, we have to talk to Jerusalem. I have to talk to Granger, Indiana, and all the people who need, because the people in Granger, Indiana need Jesus just as much as the people in Nairobi, Kenya, right? And that's an important thing to see. And if I can't talk to my neighbors, and this is a question for me, and you can think about it in your own context. If I can't talk to my neighbors about Jesus, what business do I have talking with people halfway around the world? We all need Jesus. And so we have to start our mission. Part of our mission about knowing culture is knowing how to talk not only to the people halfway around the world, but to the people right across the street. Okay? And finally, I'm going to use a fancy word here, theologizing. This is another word of what does theology mean? Study of
Religion.
Yeah, study of Jesus, study of religion. It's technically the study about God, but when we talk about theology, we're saying all the things we think, the big ways that we think. And that is a certain one author put it as, it's almost like an art. And we need to keep doing theology each and every generation. One person doesn't write a theology textbook and then say, I'm done for all time. That's not how theology works. That's not how science works. No one has ever painted a picture and said, this is the end of art. I have reached the pinnacle, it's all done. That's not how it works. We keep going on in both science and in art. We keep going on and we keep progressing. We keep thinking about things. And the same thing's true in Christianity, in the science and art of theology. Now, it doesn't mean that we come up with new ideas because we like them, but we say, how do we take these ideas and apply them into the culture? How can we help the culture understand the fact that Jesus saves us from our sins may not make much sense, but we have to put it in new language for a new generation and a new language for a new culture. And that's what we always have to be doing. We always have to be careful that we don't allow culture to dictate how we view our theology, how we view God. One thing that we need to do as we're getting together is defining some terms. So I know that I'm going to ask, I would love for a lot of people to give me an answer, but what I would like to do is to define some terms so that when we talk about these words, they make sense to our group. What is Christianity? Christ-like. Okay. So it's just being Christ-like is Christianity. No. What's Christian? Yeah.
It's a religion based on Christ, the Son of God, and it's
Yeah.
a study of it.
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to make sure we understand. When we say Christianity, we're talking about a religion. And what religions are in our world, it's a word called institution. Institutions are these big named, like sometimes faceless entities. And in our world, they are untrusted. How many of you trust the government? Think that the government has your best interest in heart? Anyone? I'm not saying you are all in high school. You're not even voting yet, and you go, I don't really trust it. You know, that's actually culture. And I'm not saying that you have to. I'm just saying it's interesting that we don't trust it. And when we say now the question is, do you trust science as an institution? Do you trust Hollywood as an institution? And the way we may feel about those things, some people do the same thing with Christianity or the church. It's an institution, it's an idea, and they say, no, this whole thing is bogus, it's bunk, I don't like it. And so Christianity is the religion of the Christian. And it has a long history and a tradition, and a lot of people in our world are unhappy. They may even follow Jesus, but they are unhappy with the religion that is Christianity. A lot of people who are like, I like Jesus, but I don't like Christianity, or I don't like the church. What is the church?
A place where people gather around and worship God.
Yeah. So it's a place.
It's a group.
It's a people. What's hard is that when we talk about church, it comes. Oh, can I? I'm a bit of a nerd. I don't know if you've caught that yet. I am. One of the things I love is language. When we go from the German word for this is Kirche. Now that's a fun one to say. Can you say that with me? Kirche. Yes, exactly. Be bold with it. Kirche. Now that is the Lord's house, and it does mean a building. But the word that this comes from in the Greek is ekklesia. Now say that. Ekklesia. It's a lot easier. You don't have to get in the throat as much. And so when you're talking about this, when he says ekklesia, that means the ones called out. Out. Kaleo would be called. So they're called out. It's always about people. So when you say the church, it is a building in our modern usage because we have Germanic roots. But ekklesia, what Jesus says, is a group of people that he has called to himself. And so when we say the church, we're talking about a community of redeemed believers. I would love, if you take notes, this is one that I have really liked, and I would love for you to say, hey, is this right? Think about it and say, maybe this could work with us. When we say, what is the church? Well, the church is a community of redeemed believers bound together and gifted by God to continue the message and ministry of Jesus for the good of the world in radical devotion. That's how the church should define itself. That is not how culture sees us. If you can think of the way people think of the church today, how does culture think of the church today? force religion on them. Hands off my body, right? One of the resounding calls in culture today is my body, my choice. Why would a bunch of stodgy old white people tell women what they can do with their bodies? Morality police. What's other ways of talking about the church? If you talk about the Catholic Church, what people sometimes think of is the scandals of what was happening with priests. And that more than that things were happening between priests and people in the pews, and then the Catholic Church covered it up, moved the priests around, and didn't address the issues underlying all of it.
They think it's people that judge other people.
They're judgmental,
Judgmental.
right?
Hypocritical.
Homophobic, xenophobic, racist, misogynistic. And do those labels have merit? In some cases, the church has not done a good job of expressing the love of Jesus while holding to truth, while holding to the morality that Jesus gave us. So there's a reason why people feel these ways. I'm not saying that they're right, but I'm saying that those terms, and those are powerful terms today. Because what happens when you say someone is homophobic, racist, xenophobic, transphobic, misogynistic? When you say that in our world, in our culture today, when you say someone is like that, do you have to listen to what they tell you? Do you have to listen to them at all? No. Deplatform them. Get them out of the public. They don't have a voice to speak. And should we give Nazis a platform? I don't want to, because they're evil and they're racist. And yet, when the church has been called that, is that correct? How do we deal with that? That's an important thing about our culture today. And we've been saying this word a lot, but culture. It's important to recognize when we talk about culture, and this is one where I'm not going to ask you, I'm going to tell you a little about what it is. Culture is a system of beliefs and practices that are built upon implicit assumptions that people make about themselves, about the world around them, and about ultimate realities. Now that's a lot of things that I just said. But culture it's a bunch of things that we take for granted. It's all the ideas that are under the surface. You don't really have a culture. Very often we don't talk about culture. Culture just happens around us. We don't say, what do these things mean that's happening? It's just they happen. And then we respond to them. Oh, there we go. So it's the idea then being beliefs and practices, how we think and what we do. And these are implicit assumptions. Implicit is the opposite of explicit. Implicit is everybody just assumes it. It's just the way it is. It's all quiet and under the radar. And then the people make about thoughts that they make about themselves, about the world around them, and about ultimate realities. Greek culture assumed that the world was governed by multiple gods. That was it. Why did they think that? Because they looked around and they saw the world in sort of a chaotic mess. They said, well, multiple gods have to do this. If there was one God, he wouldn't let the world be chaotic as it is. So that's an assumption. We have to unpack it and say, is that correct? It's important that as we think about these things, oh no, I made a mistake. Oh no, okay. Ha! Nice. Is this better than the whiteboard? Or would this be where the whiteboard be better? It would be, I'm not sure if it would have a glare. One thing that we have to recognize is that when we talk about culture, at the outside is the practices. That would be, what are some things that happen in culture that describe a culture? Now, I've been saying that. Now, what do you think? When you say a culture, what does that make you think of? And I mean, really, small, you can think small things as well. A way of living. How you dress. All of us in here actually look pretty similar because we're all dressing the same. If we took all of us and put us in Saudi Arabia, would we look like them? Would we stick out? We'd stick out pretty quickly. The dress is different. Food is part of culture. music is part of culture. Food is part of culture. When you think about what do you have, what is your Thanksgiving dinner? The fact that I can say Thanksgiving dinner and you know what I mean means that you're part of an American culture. When you think about what do you have at Easter for after Easter, again, the fact that you know what Easter is tells you part of your culture, but then the fact that you can also say, well, everybody has ham on Easter. Like, I don't know if you actually do, but that's what my family does. This is practices that define a culture. But but beneath that are the values that our culture builds up. What's an American cultural value? If I said that to you, you may not actually know, but what would you think? What are some of the things that we prize in the United States? Go ahead. Freedom! 4th of July, baby! Shoot off the fireworks! Woo! Right? USA! That's an American value. And is it, the question we can say, if we start to analyze culture, we can say, is that value justified? But it's part of the value structure, right? What's another one? Freedom, but also independence. If you've ever heard the phrase, pick yourself up by your own bootstrap, right? Success, wealth, valuing your own achievements based on what you produce. Production, efficiency. All those words get American blood pumping because we're like, these are the things that make us who we are. We are exceptional because of these things. But all of it is underlined, and that's what this last word here is, by our worldview. Now, the worldview is the way you view the world, and that is not helpful because it's a circular thing. It's basically with the glasses that we put on and how we see everything. When we put on American cultural glasses, we can't help but see the world through this worldview. It shapes our values. It shapes and our values and our worldview shape the practices that we have. So it's important these are central assumptions and concepts and premises, and they're shared by all the members of the culture or even the subculture. I think we've talked about that. Yes. So what we have here is that all of us are human. This is what shapes our mind. And what shapes our mind at the bottom of our nature is our human nature. Everybody is human. We all think this. We all are able to think with our brains because of our human nature. We get this genetically through our inheritance. Our culture is the next thing that shapes us. Built upon our human nature, cultures can be vastly different. But they shape us more. They give us ideas and assumptions that may never be questioned. And then finally, at the very top, we have personality. Each individual person is different, but it's built. But you, as much as you think, I am a truly unique individual and no one is like me and nothing determines what I think and feel, you have a lot of things holding your personality up. And that's not bad, because we're all like that. We all have to and what we get to do as humans is actually go, this culture that I'm a part of, is it good? Is the American church the best way? Is America the best culture? The one that I want to be a part of? Or is the American church living the best possible way to live, which is the way that Jesus taught us? So I want to talk about current culture, which is the world that we live in right now, which is postmodernism. Now, if we are talking about a thing called postmodernism, we have to get to that point. Because culture doesn't spring up out of nothing. It comes because of things that came before, and if there's a postmodernism, there's a modernism. And so we need to understand how that works. If we're trying to say, we'll actually go past that. So I want to talk about eras of history based on a couple different ideas. And I would love for you to help me think through these, and if you have any questions, please let me know. But when we talk about the world, we can split the world into a couple different eras. I don't know if I actually have this up here. The ancient world is from about 2500 BC to about 500 AD. That's a long time for the world to think this way. But it's helpful to see it in that regard. What happened is that the worldview was regional. You focused, everything was about the people that you were around. Because how hard was it to move in the ancient world? The answer is very. When cars don't exist, things like this don't happen. People were focused around their own culture. People were in Babylon, and sometimes in the same city they were born in their entire life. Their understanding was that they put their faith in the kings who were given by God. They put their faith in the empire they are a part of. Their communication was oral. They spoke to one another. They told stories. They shared messages. The authority was revelation given from the divine. And the theme is, what does it mean to be human? That's the great question of the Greeks. What is a man? One person said, a featherless biped. That's all it is to be a human. So God plucked a chicken and said, behold the man. Right? No, he said, these are what does it mean to be human? That's the question of the ancient world. And then the world, in about 500 changes. At 500 AD, Rome falls, and the world becomes different. Instead, from 500 AD to around 1500 AD, we have the medieval world. The medieval world, it's Judeo-Christian, right? Christianity reigns supreme. It controls the world, right? So this is when the Catholic Church was the only church, and it controlled everything and everyone was born. And if you were born, you were going to be christened, and you were going to be Christian. That was just the way it was. And of course, this is in the Western world. That power and faith in the church was the way that we understood. The church gave truth. No one else had an opportunity to understand it. There was manuscript, but also oral communication. Manuscript meaning that words were just starting to be really written down. Where's the authority? The Bible as interpreted by the church. And the theme of the age is I believe in order to understand. I believe, and therefore that's how I understand the world around me. But then, because of the Reformation in the 1500s, the subsequent Enlightenment, and we'll say 2000 AD is where it kind of ends. Make it really nice and round. And because of the Enlightenment, we come to the modern world. And so, we're in the modern age. Now, it's important to understand that this is how things have been going. Things have been progressing. In the modern age, we trust in reason. That's the world. How many of you have heard in recent years, trust the science? Yeah, if you've heard it a lot, right? And why is that? Because in the modern mindset, the modern world, science is, for lack of a better term, God. Science cannot do wrong. As long as we do the best, as long as we do the best science, and that's a question if we are, we trust in our reason, we trust in science, we trust, and what is reason when I say that? It's not reasons, it's reason with a capital R. What is that?
The logic behind it.
The logic, absolutely. We talk about reason, it's logic, it's how we think. Modernity is all about this. And so power and faith, the understanding comes through faith in our understanding, faith in reasoning. We're all able to, we're able to understand the world around us because our brains are so great. And that's the Enlightenment. And what happens in this world is that communication happens because of the printing press. We all had books in our homes. For the first time ever, you can own copies of books. This is an absolutely insane and new idea, and it's wonderful. It's been that the fact that you guys are all able to be here, and I can tell you things, and you have knowledge about the world around you, is because of things like this. Reason, science, and logic are our authorities, but then knowledge is power. The modern world is really interesting because it believed that because of reason and science and logic, we could control our destiny. We could control the world around us, right? There was a giant, through the 1800s and into the early 1900s, there was a belief that we were going to bring about utopia. That as science keeps progressing, one day the world will be perfect and there will be peace. And then, what happened in the early 19-teens?
World
World
War I.
Yes. World War I broke out because the entire world got plunged into a war because one man shot another man on his way through a country. And the entire world went to war over it. That's what happened for World War I. And then World War II happened after that because a genocidal maniac decided that he was going to try and take over the entire world. And it ended with the promise of science to move us forward to utopia, ended with 2 bombs being dropped upon the country of Japan. Like, that is what progress got us to. That is what science and reason and logic got us to. And so, what we get in the modern world is, the twin gods of reason and science turn out to be nothing more than dead idols. So, throughout the 1900s, America goes through this shift because America was riding high off of it not being the ones who caused the destruction in Japan, not being the ones who did the destroying. They're the ones who did the destroying, not being the ones who were destroyed. But in the 1960s and 70s, America also started saying, is this all it is? And I'm not saying that we did the right thing in addressing it, but they were saying, what's the way that we should view the world? And so postmodernism, the thing that we're getting into, our worldview in our world today is self-determined. No one tells me what I'm going to do, what I'm going to think, what I'm going to feel. I get to control it by my own ideas. Is that a good way to live? To have the world be exactly anything that you want to think is perfectly okay? Is it? Is that the best way to live? Power and faith is in experience. The idea being more important than me saying, hey, let's both have the best information in front of us, talk about it, and come to an agreement. If you say, well, this data, this stuff in front of me, it doesn't match up with my lived experience, then boom, all the data doesn't matter because the lived experience is primary. That's our world today. And what I'm giving you is not new information, but I'm helping you see that that's a cultural thing. That's not the way it's always been. Communication. You have it in your hands. I've seen you take pictures. You have all of and that's perfectly fine. Take as many pictures as you want. And if you want the slides, I'll send them to you after the class is over. Right? Like any information you want from me, I'll give it right away. All of you have literally all of the world's information in your pocket. Do you realize that? Do you realize how amazing that is? So when I talk about the world and our culture, it's not all bad. Please don't hear me say that. I'm glad that you can, at any point today, I was talking to Jerry, and I said, Jerry, what is the percentage of the population of New York that lives in the city? Do you know what? And I was like, well, I don't know. And Jerry's like, I don't know, maybe 20%. Like, we don't know. We looked it up. 43%. And I was able to figure that out in a heartbeat, in a second, because the information of the world is in our pockets. But that is something that has changed all of our understanding of the world, because we're able to hear. Here's a question. How we communicate is different. Here's a question for you. Has the world gotten more violent? Seeing head nods, heads shake. It's fly swatter. He's got his flies up, his fly detector up. Yeah.
Since when? Since the beginning of...
We'll say since 1900. The answer, well, okay, that's actually not fair. Since 1900, yes. But it's actually over the past few decades, since the 1980s, 90s, violent crime has been rapidly decreasing. That doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right, does it? No, it actually has been rapidly decreasing all across the United States. There's been a little uptick in the last couple years. Right before COVID, it was down and it went up during COVID, and it's kind of had some interesting things in the last few years. But the reason why you said yes, don't feel bad about saying yes, the reason why you said yes is because it's in your pocket. At any moment of any day, someone can be showing you the worst parts of humanity. So while it's amazing that the internet is that all the information of the world is in your pocket, we should not just say internet, but media. How many of you, you don't have to share, how many of you are on TikTok? No? How many of you are on some other social media platform where you hear from people that you don't always do life with? Okay, that's a lot more hands. Those people can tell you the worst parts of their world in a heartbeat. You can know about everything that's bad in a time and place where bad things have always happened. Bad things are happening less. But now, bad things that happen half a country away can be stuff that is in your pocket in a fraction of a moment. So that's the world that we live in. Authority, however, is viewed with suspicion. All authority has suspicion cast on it. In this case, we talk about the government, this is the church, all these institutions. We say, why do they have power? Why do they have authority? Why do we trust them? And then the theme of the age, the theme of postmodernism, is a phrase, and hopefully you've heard me say there's some good and some bad throughout this. I think this is a very dangerous one to live by, but it's one I know that you've heard, or some version of it. If it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. That's the theme of our day. If it makes you happy, can it really be that bad? And of course, when we talk about all this is all, I am making a case that is very Western and Eurocentric, meaning it's focused on Europe and the United States. These ages and time frames are different if you looked at Africa and Asia, and if you looked at South America in a lot of cases. But all of that is a secondary point that I can't talk about every culture all the time. We have to talk about where we are right now. And this, I would say, is where we are right now. That's the world that we live in. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, or concerns so far?
We're spiraling downward.
I hope you don't hear me say that.
No, but in a way we are, because there's so many people who actually are lost and need help, and they're leading the community. That's who's leading us, not people who have the right mindset.
I do agree with that to a degree. I want to say that the culture that we live in is not all bad. The fact that people care about justice is really good. And the fact that Christians should be on the front line of any issue that is truly about justice. And so we should be encouraged in saying, what does justice look like in our world? But then at the same time, we have to say, are the things that are in place actually about justice? What we see is sometimes people who claim to be about justice are really about their own power or their own wealth. And so we need to be skeptics. We need to be skeptical in some ways because those people are lost. And so, but as Christians, if we have a relationship to Jesus, we should be on the front lines of some of these issues. So there's some good things and some bad things. That we want the world to be better than it is certainly good. And we should hold industries that are doing evil things accountable. We should hold our government accountable to the promises that it makes to its people. And at the same time, we should be careful to say that it's not all bad and it's not all good. But there are definitely people across the world who need to hear the message of Jesus, which is why it's so important. It would be wonderful if the message of Jesus was taught in such a way that everyone who heard it went like, that, I want that, rather than Jesus, ugh, the church, faith, why would I want any of that? That's the way that people respond to it right now. So as we define postmodernism, I want to give you a couple different definitions of what we mean when people talk about it. Jean-Francois Lyotard. That's a fun name to say. He's very French. It's actually a French idea. A lot of the way that we talk about this language was defined by Frenchmen in the 1960s, right? So that's three main Frenchmen, but he's one of them. He says that postmodernism is a lot of interesting words. Incredulity toward meta-narratives. Disbelief in stories that say that they are universal. Is the Christian story would be a meta-narrative. It says that there is one story that explains all of reality. And then what the world says is that shouldn't be the case. There's not one story that explains all reality. It's all multiple narratives. We all have our own narrative, and then our communities help, when we link up with other people in the world around us, we create a shared narrative. And and Leotard would say that I guess, before I go on, what's a narrative? Anyone? English nerds? What's a narrative? A story.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So we share a story. You all are living out a story. And Leotard said that as we come together as people, we share a story. And the story that we share together helps determine what we think about the world around us. So meta-narratives are knowledge claims supposedly supported by universal objective reason without recourse to narrative claim of a specific people group. Meta-narratives say, I don't need, this is the one story, one idea, one claim that doesn't need to be supported by my own experience. And today, in our world today, lived experience is the top thing. It's the thing that's most important. As a group comes together, they say, what determines truth is what these members of this community have been through. That's the way that the world thinks about truth, about authority, about reason. All claims are put through a filter of, does it match up with what my community has been through? So all truth claims, according to Leotard, are made from inside a narrative structure. Does 2 plus 2 equal 4?
No, it's 3.
It equals 3. Or if you're talking about Big Brother, 2 plus 2 equals 5. Have any of you read, what's that one? 1984, Big Brother. 2 plus 2 equals 5. Big Brother told him so. And if Big Brother says it equals 4, it will equal 4. Right? It's this idea that there's a group saying what is true. Leotard would say, even the claim like 2 plus 2 equals 4 comes from our culture. That because of how we do math and how we have got to this point and the narrative that we live in, that is where that claim comes from. That the sky is blue is made inside of a narrative structure. That all of these things, not that we can change them necessarily, but that we understand the world because of the stories that we tell ourselves. And this is a guy defining what he sees to be a good thing. I want to give you, however, an example from a man named Jordan Peterson of another definition of postmodernism, someone who is against postmodernism.
Now, hypothetically, it's an attitude of skepticism, irony towards rejection of great narratives, ideologies, and universalism, criticizes objective notions of reason, human nature, social progress, absolute truth, and objective reality. It's predicated on the idea that the reason that you categorize, the reason that you categorize is to marginalize. You categorize to marginalize to obtain power. Power is pretty much all there is. There's other elements of postmodernism. One of them is that human nature is merely a social construct. See, the reason for that, as far as I'm concerned, and this is the postmodern critique as well, I'm going to move the center to the margin and the margin to the centers. Why would you think that human nature is only a social construct? Well, here's why. It's because that means you can construct it any way you want to. That was a very common idea among the communists. That's why Mao wanted to wipe out Chinese history. That's why the Red Guard went around in China and tried to destroy everything, every element of China's history prior to approximately 1960. That great culture, thousands and thousands of years old. So also you can bring in the new man. Well, what is the new man? Well, it was whatever slave Mao happened to fantasize about. Or it was the utopian person. You take your pick, but like I said, if you take a look at the corpses, you can pretty much figure out which of those two it was. So what's up with these people? These deconstructionists, these postmodernists, what are they up to exactly? Well, here's the first thing. They came about pretty much when Marxism was no longer credible, no longer tenable as an intellectual, a set of intellectual propositions. Now, if you were a French intellectual, you had to have a lot of corpses piled at your feet before you were willing to think that you were wrong. So, here's an example. I don't remember his name. He was the architect of the killing fields in Cambodia. It wasn't Pol Pot, it was one of his advisors. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name. He took his PhD at the Sorbonne. And he developed the thesis in the Sorbonne, Marx's thesis, that the cities were parasites on the land. You know, it's an extension of the whole bourgeoisie proletariat thing. The cities were full of bourgeois types, educated parasites, essentially, who were doing nothing but stealing what was rightly the farmers. So when he came back to Cambodia, he put that into action and emptied out the cities. And put all the intellectuals and the city dwellers either to death or to work, which generally resulted in death, and killed about 1/6 to 1/4 of the population. But he got his PhD from the Sorbonne. And that's a good story, because that's exactly how complicit the Western leftist intellectuals were in facilitating the horrors of the 20th century. And it's not like we've learned anything since then. Quite the contrary. We've just gone underground. And that's what I see. That's what I see when I see postmodernism. So what happened was, despite the affinity of Western intellectuals for Marxism, maybe because they weren't paid as much as bankers, let's say, if we're being cynical about it. Because I've often thought that if you paid sociologists as much as investment bankers, they'd be capitalists very rapidly. Well, which is also to say that you may underpay intellectuals at your peril. And you know, that's actually dangerous, because one of the things that's happening is that as the universities have become corporatized and corrupted in a variety of ways, more and more of the professors are adjuncts, right? I think it's up to 30, 40, 50%, something like that now. They've got no tenure, they've got no job security, paid like $8.
Did we lose it? Okay, great. So the idea is that what happens in postmodernism is that to define it in ways that are not two different guys' definitions, is that it resists meta-narratives. All the ways of thinking are based in narratives, and to deny this is to say that you rise above it, because your thoughts and beliefs and way of seeing are controlled by universal, unquestioning assumption. Hey, there we go. So the first part of postmodernism we want to say is it's resisting meta-narratives. All of our ideas postmodernism says, no, there are narratives, and if you try to say that your ideas are above it, then that's not going to work. Another part of postmodernism is skepticism. And that's the suspicion of authority that we've already talked about. Institutions like the church and the government are considered suspect. It's highly critical of how we can know anything. Can we know anything? If you say all knowledge is based on what we are experiencing at the moment, then it's going to be very hard to say that we can know anything. Another one is, have you heard, now here's a question for you. Have you heard anyone say that they have been or they are deconstructing? Have you heard that term? Maybe? You have. Okay. What does that mean when people say that they're deconstructing? Or if maybe you've heard the term deconstructing faith. What they're doing is they're saying what do I, when they're really questioning, what we would call it back in the days, they're questioning their faith. They're questioning the way they were raised, the way they were taught. But deconstructing is the idea of taking apart everything that a person believes and saying, what's at the root? What underlies all my beliefs? And in our world today, what happens is that people deconstruct, take down all their beliefs, and then they leave them all piled up on the ground. That's a very postmodern thing to do. Because that's actually one of the terms of the postmodernists is to say deconstruction, to say that they are going to bring things down and take them apart. Imagine you have a boat. What is a boat? What defines boatness?
I knew the acronym was both. I'm pretty sure it's an acronym.
I don't think it's an acronym.
Point, object, and
Tasty. Boat. A boy. No, I don't think it's an acronym. But what I'm trying to say is, that's a question. That seems like a silly question, right? To deconstruct a boat is a silly thing, and to deconstruct a boat, you just stick a hacksaw to it, right? What is a human? Can you deconstruct a human and say what a human is at the base level? Take it apart piece by piece? Or, what is man? What is woman?
That would depend on like.
Dun dun dun! I appreciate that. I like that. It does. It's a bigger question. What is it? A profound question of our day is, what is a woman?
Have you seen that movie?
I have.
Okay.
Do you want to say
I know the answer.
No.
from
Well, I mean, the answer from the movie is interesting, and I think he's not wrong. An adult human female. But people don't want to answer the question. See, what happens when you deconstruct is that you get to the base root. If you say, oh, women are really, men and women are really, what happens is when you ask the question, what is a woman, you say, well, what you're doing is you're actually trying to pit men and women against each other. So, because men have a power structure in place and women are being oppressed by men, and so what we need to do is flip the script on its head and have women oppress men, have women rise to the top and go over their fields. And I'm not saying that there's all those ideas are wrong or they're coming from a bad place, but the question that really is at the bottom of it, when you say, what is a man? What is a woman? What is human? All of those are deconstructions. It's the idea that we can get to the bottom of these ideas. So when people say they're deconstructing their faith, they're saying, why would I trust the Bible? And instead of what they usually come away with is, no one's giving me a good answer. Part of knowing what deconstruction is, knowing that people are tearing apart their ideas, is that you can walk beside them when they ask those questions. And that as the church, we need to be a place where those kinds of questions are allowed. Why do we trust the Bible? Why do we think Jesus really did live? Why do we trust that there is a God? All those questions are valid questions, but what happens when people deconstruct their world today, they tear apart all their ideas, they don't build anything back up after the fact. One of the parts of our culture is what's called the death of the author. The idea being that, oh, is it gonna, see, it says things and then it lies to me, and I've been hurt too many times before. Oh, it's I've been emotionally damaged by this screen. The death of the author is a strange phrase, but it means that a text can mean whatever you want it to mean. One of the trivial ways that this is expressed is fan fiction, where people accept headcanons where characters have relationships that are not in the original. Like, someone writes a fan fiction where Draco is really in love with Hermione. And everybody's like, if you know Harry Potter. See, I'm a millennial and Harry Potter is my age, so whatever the book that you read is now. What's the most popular book right now?
Nine.
What?
What?
What is it? I really don't.
I have no idea.
Did you not have a Harry Potter of your age?
I don't read.
I can't read.
I will fight you right now. Harry Potter's fantastic. Or just take any TV show. Any TV show you like, any streaming service that you like, you say, this person's with this person that's not in the original. That's you being able to impact the story. It's a part of the fact that it's not in the original. More famously, I can think of an example when you say, the death of the author means that the author's intent in the writing doesn't matter. And one of the things I think of is a podcast that I listened to called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. And this is why I'm a nerd. For example, it's a gay man who was raised as a Christian and an atheist Jewish woman read Harry Potter as if it were a sacred text. Meaning they read, this podcast of these two people that are very different from me come to Harry Potter and they read a chapter and they treat it like they're reading the Bible. That it's going to give them truths about their life. It doesn't matter that J.K. Rowling didn't mean for that to happen. They said, we can do whatever we want with a book once it's in our hands. And we can make it mean whatever we want it to mean. That's the death of the author. Now, if you live in a world where your faith is based upon a book, and the author's intent doesn't matter, could you make the book say whatever you want it to say? That's the claim against Christianity. That the Bible doesn't mean what you think it means. The Bible can mean whatever anyone wants it to mean, because we can interpret it however we so choose. Another part of Christianity, or another part of postmodernism that we will have to deal with, is that history can be rewritten. History is viewed to be suspect. Why? Because history is written by the winners, or so the claim is. So when the ones who come out on top, so when we are deprived of, so those who are deprived of power and deprived of happiness, joy, and success, those are the very ones whose voices have been marginalized. For example, in the book Guns, Germs, and Steel, the point was, why did Europe conquer South America rather than vice versa? Why did the people from Spain go to Mexico and conquer that land rather than the people from Mexico going to Spain? His whole point is, it has nothing to do with God or faith or progress or great people. It all has to do with the fact that they were just slightly ahead. So humanity is nothing more than competition. It's nothing more than conquering one another and the luck of the draw and the luck of birth. That's a hard place to be, because you can say, well, all things that happen that are good, and as long as they were done by people who were oppressing other people, they're really bad. Another thing that happens is that we can attack science. So the question, what is a woman, has been proposed by certain people, because the answer is, because the cultural milieu of our day says that that anyone who claims to be a woman is a woman. Is that scientifically correct? And we're starting to maybe touch on some issues that's close to you, close to the people that you love, close to the people that you know. And I'm not trying to be rude, but I think it's important that we ask that question. And when I say attack science, the question is, if science says something that goes against our happiness, our self-perception, then science must be wrong. That's the claim that's being made in a postmodern world. That if I look at the world around me and it says a woman is a person with 2 X chromosomes, an adult human female, with all of the abilities of a human female, the kind of a female, then it can't be other things. Certain things are excluded from the definition of what a woman could be. But postmodernism says no. That's why we have a culture right now that says that we don't want to define it. The only way to define a woman is to get the definition of a person who says that she is a woman. When we talk about postmodernism, there's some final attendant aspects. This will be our last thing for today. The idea being, so these are some of these smaller things. So the idea of resisting grand narratives, skepticism, deconstruction, the death of the author, and rewriting history are big, and attacking science are big ideas. There are a lot of other attendant, smaller things that are happening. Basically, pluralism. That means that it's not monotheism. The world is set up in such a way that it's that all religions are equally valid. There's not one religion, there's not one God, but all religions. That's postmodernism says everything's equally valid. Whatever's true for you is true for you, whatever's true for me is true for me. It says it's experiential, not rational. The idea being, again, that what you experience determines what is true, not how one thinks about it. It's mystical but not religious. How many of you know someone who is spiritual but not religious? That's a great question. That's actually defined on statistics. And they say it's the largest, or it's the fastest growing way to identify your faith in America. And it means that you could believe, people who believe that crystals create an energy field and an aura and set their energy right. People who burn sage in their home to clear out bad energy. People who believe in angels or demons or the occult, but they don't go to a church, or they're not Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist. They're not part of an organized religion, but they believe in supernatural things. That would be spiritual but not religious. And mystical, meaning they might even believe in God or Jesus, but they don't have a religious bent to it. They don't go to church. They don't take communion. They're not what we would sometimes think about when we say what we mean by faith. It's narrative, not propositional. What I'm doing right now is I'm giving you a lot of ideas and propositions. And if I was wanting to talk to postmodern people, I should tell a story. Which is why the sermon last night is not about, it's more about a person. Like, that's a much better, I know that you're like, oh, I signed up for a class, and now he's just lecturing me for an hour and a half. I get it. There's a lot of information to unpack here. We're going to be talking, you're going to be having a lot more questions tomorrow. It's fluid, not systematic, meaning that ideas go back and forth. Global, not local. You think big, not the people next door. It's communal and tribal, not individualistic. We don't move, in the postmodern world, we don't think about ourselves as individuals primarily, but as members of communities. Not, I am Jake Ballard, but I am and what happens a lot of times is that your community is chosen for you. So I'm a straight, cis, white, male Christian. That would be the communities that have been chosen for me. And then finally, it's not about truth, necessarily, in the postmodern mindset. They're not concerned about truth so much as they're concerned about preference. What do we prefer? How do we think about these ideas? As we come back tomorrow, what we're going to be talking about is the way some things that have died in our world. And so what that will mean is we'll be talking about post-Christianity and the statistics that have happened in the as Christianity has begun to shrink in our world around us. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. It's about 4 minutes, so you need to leave, but I think that's going to be fine. So you are dismissed